Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. There is big news today. The church just discontinued the Saturday evening sessions of General Conference. It is now done. What does it mean? I don't know, but I do have some thoughts. There's actually a lot of things to talk about in this video. So thank you to Mindy with Temples of Jesus. She is constantly scanning the news. She does a much better job than I do. She sent me a text and I had to look at this right away. Okay, so church news increases focus on four daytime sessions of General Conference. Saturday evening session will no longer be held. This is stunning to me. My entire life, there's always been a Saturday evening session. In fact, until President Nelson, it had always been the priesthood session. That's something that I thought would continue forever. Like it was just a permanent fixture. I can't believe that changed, number one, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. But now there isn't even a Saturday evening session at all. And here's the statement. It's one sentence. The First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has decided that beginning in April 2026, General Conference will no longer include a Saturday evening session. Okay, stick with me because there's a lot of interesting things to point out. Okay, I went to Church News. They did an article about this, and they didn't really shed too much light as to why this decision was made. I was hoping that there'd be more insight, but they did include something really important at the end of the article. And I think that we need to look at this through this context. Elder Brooke P. Hales, the General Authority 70 and Secretary to the First Presidency, said in a Church News podcast interview that General Conference is, quote unquote, heaven directed. Now, I know a lot of people struggle with this idea, people that are members of our church, that we have a living prophet, that it's the Lord that directs the church, and he does it through his prophet and the apostles. But ultimately, what the church does is the Lord's will, including General Conference. Some people are going to have the attitude, oh yeah, they got together and they were thinking about it, and this is what they decided. No, that's not how this church works. They do go through a process of problem solving and discussing and pondering and such. The Lord doesn't dictate every little thing, but especially with big changes like this, the Lord does have his hand in it, and it's because of his will. Continuing, the Lord is the executive producer. This is his event. He wants it to happen. He helps it happen, said Elder Hales, who, through his employment in the office of the First Presidency, has been involved in General Conference preparations since 1997. During that time, he said he has learned one important thing about planning and organizing the Mammoth event. Quote, "This is the opportunity for the Lord to speak to his people." With that being said, before I read the rest of it, why is the Lord discontinuing this session? And I have some thoughts on that, but I would like you to think about it and maybe put your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe there's something that I'm not considering. This is the opportunity for the Lord to speak to his people, unique in every way possible. I can trust God and the Savior completely. Okay, so when I was searching for this article, this one came up. I was very confused. This is dated June 7th, 2021. First Presidency announces changes to General Conference. Saturday evening session will be discontinued. In-person attendance for October 2021 conference will not be available. So it looks like they had already decided to do this back in 2021, but for some reason it didn't stick. I don't know if there was an explanation for that, why they decided to continue, but it doesn't seem like what happened today just came out of nowhere. There was the thought, the attempt to do it back in 2021. The First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has announced changes to upcoming general conferences of the church, which are held each April and October. Beginning with October's general conference and continuing thereafter, the Saturday evening sessions will be discontinued. Previously, a Saturday evening session was held for women in October and priesthood holders in April. This change is being made because all sessions of General Conference are now available to anyone who desires to watch or listen. Which I don't know. Sorry, that doesn't quite make sense to me, because it seems that the reason why they had priesthood sessions and women's sessions is because there were unique talks that were tailored to those different groups, to their specific needs. It's not so much that, well, now everybody can. So I'm not criticizing, but that doesn't really make sense to me. It seemed like, it's the whole reason why we have, in church, we have priesthood and then we have relief society. Men and women are different. They communicate differently. We do join together for sacrament and we hear messages that are prepared for the entire ward. Sometimes we do have joint meetings, like on the fifth Sunday. But we also separate because there's this fundamental difference between men and women, and it's appropriate to gather together and share, similar experiences and questions and concerns, and talk about how to be better men and how to be better women. So I don't know, but that's what they said here. For the October 2021 General Conference, to be held October 2nd through 3rd, conference proceedings will originate from the Conference Center Auditorium in Salt Lake City. Once again, the Conference Center will be closed to the public. So that's because of the pandemic. Okay, so, and then I had put together this spreadsheet using the church website. When you go to the general conference section, I went conference by conference and I took down what took place each conference for the Saturday evening session. To my knowledge, before I did this exercise, I don't know when I did this, it was probably a couple years ago. To my knowledge, it had always been the priesthood session. And that's kind of the only, that for my perception, that's all that it ever was. You had the priesthood session Saturday evening, and then you just had the 4 other sessions. I never really tracked that you had these women's sessions that took place in conjunction with General Conference, because usually it was done on a different day of the week or earlier in the month or what have you. But I learned a lot about General Conference by doing this. Before I show you what I have here, I want to point to something that at the time Elder Jeffrey R. Holland said in the October 2006 General Conference, Prophets in the Land Again. He says, as prophets have done in dispensations from Adam down to the present day, President Hinckley has figuratively gathered us in a kind of global equivalent of the valley of Adam-ondi-Ahman, has loved us and taught us and bestowed upon us his blessing. I took this down because I wonder if that's a hint as to how Adam-ondi-Ahman is actually going to take place. Now, this video is not about Adam-ondi-Ahman, but I have a bunch of different quotes. One that says that church membership at large is not going to know about Adam-ondi-Ahman. But yet we have other statements that seem to indicate that the whole church will participate. And I wonder if this is how. I wonder if General Conference, with all these different sessions that we've had, like special sessions for different groups and for different purposes, may actually be part of the proceedings of Adam-ondi-Ahman. Bruce R. McConkie talks about the fact that Adam-ondi-Ahman will most likely be broken up into different sessions with different purposes. And then I could see how maybe some of it would actually take place at the actual location of Adam-ondi-Ahman, maybe with select leaders, but then maybe the rest of it is going on and we're not aware of it. For example, the April 2020 General Conference, where we did a lot of very special things. So, as we think about the Saturday evening session and how it's had different purposes, let's just look at how this has gone. Let's start at the beginning. On the church website, you can only go back to 1971. So, Saturday evening, you have the priesthood session. You also had sessions on Tuesday morning, um, in October, Friday morning. So, you have these additional days here in column F. And then 1974, you start having welfare sessions, which I think is just really interesting. That's kind of an alien idea to me. But for a while, they had welfare sessions from April 1974 until October 1982. And then October 1978, you have a general women's meeting. And then two conferences later, women's fireside addresses, which was part of General Conference, according to the church website. And then you have other ones that go by different names. And then you have some special ones. April 1986, priesthood leadership meeting. April 1990, member finances fireside. April 1992, Relief Society oh my gosh, sesquicentennial satellite broadcast. And then October 1993, they start alternating between the General Relief Society meeting and General Young Women meeting. April 1999, and this was, I guess, in February, but in conjunction with General Conference. February 1999, Conversion and Retention broadcast. April 2003, special satellite broadcast for children in conjunction with General Conference. And you'll notice that this entire time in column C, the Saturday evening session is the priesthood session. Of course. I thought that was just like a monolithic fixture in our church, that it would never change. Okay, and then the last time that we have a general young women meeting is April 2013. And after that, it goes back to just these women's sessions, but by different names for some reason. I don't know if there's an actual difference because of the name, or I don't know what. And then President Nelson comes along, and his first general conference, the April General Conference of 2018, everything was normal. He actually didn't speak until the priesthood session. I have done videos about that, and that led to other things, but I was like, okay, what's going on here? He didn't speak, because, you have this new prophet. President Monson just passed away, and you're waiting to hear from the new prophet. Well, in this case, he waited until the Saturday evening session, the priesthood session. But then the next conference in October, this is the first time that I know of that the Saturday evening session was now the general women's session, and there was no priesthood session. And then next April it went back to priesthood. Then after that it goes back to the women's session, and then April General Conference of 2020 that we were just talking about, it definitely was a very, very special conference. The Saturday evening session became a joint session, and then back to women, and then back to priesthood, and then back to joint. What did this say here? If we go back to this, beginning with October's General Conference and continuing thereafter, the Saturday evening sessions will be discontinued. So what they did instead is it was a joint session. So there was a Saturday evening session, but instead of being discontinued, it was a joint session. And then back to women in April. And then after that, October 2022 until October 2025, joint sessions. Excuse me. And so that's what I thought was going to continue. I was starting to wonder if we would ever see a priesthood session again, or a women's session, or some other kind of session. Well, it turns out that the answer is there are not going to be any more Saturday evening sessions. So I guess my spreadsheet is complete. There's nothing else to add to this or change. This is really interesting. Let's go to something that President Oaks said in the April 2022 General Conference, in the introductory message, where he talked about the Saturday evening session. So what did he say back then? My dear sisters, as we begin this unique women's session of General Conference, I am pleased to deliver this introductory message from the First Presidency. Our Saturday sessions have a history of different purposes and different audiences. This evening, we add to that history as we embark upon a new purpose and procedure for the foreseeable future. The gospel of Jesus Christ does not change. Gospel doctrine does not change. Our personal covenants do not change. But over the years, the meetings we hold to communicate our messages do change and very likely will continue to change over the years. For now, this Saturday evening meeting is a session of General Conference, not a session of any organization. Like all sessions of General Conference, the planning, speakers, and music are designated by the First Presidency. As far as I know, that's all that's been said about the Saturday evening session, its purpose. He says our Saturday sessions have a history of different purposes in different audiences, which, let's see, May 2022. Let's see, May 2020 or April 2022. I mean, yeah, that statement was true starting October 2018, that it was for different audiences. But before that, as far as I know, as far as I can tell, it was always the priesthood session. So these things are we really haven't seen this before. Okay, I have another spreadsheet called Timeline Preparing the Church for the Second Coming. You'll remember that when President Nelson became president of the church, there was a flurry of big and dramatic changes to the church. And, I've tried to capture as many as I can on this spreadsheet. And I've wondered, are all these happening because of the second coming? Because we're getting ready for a large influx of new members? Let's read a couple things before we discuss that further. Let's read a couple things on this spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 369 for Millennium, Missionary Work, and Influx of Converts. This is from Bradley R. Wilcox, second counselor in the Young Men General Presidency. This is an Ensign College devotional, October 12th, 2021. There is a hurry. Oh, that's interesting. I just realized that. He said this October of 2021. That's when they were going to discontinue the Saturday evening session. Instead, they made it a joint session. And I'm wondering if he's what I'm about to read to you. He's said it at least a couple times, once at this Ensign College devotional and then another time at a fireside. I'm going to read the version from the devotional. But I've wondered if what he says here are like actual conversations that they've had in church leadership meetings. Like they're preparing for the reality of the second coming, and what does the church in reality and practically need to do to prepare for that day. So think about this as we think about all these changes since President Nelson, including the discontinuance of the Saturday evening session. All right, he says, gathering Israel is about preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that is how we do it. If 1 million people wanted to join the church tomorrow, would we be ready? Would we have enough bishops, Relief Society presidents, stake presidents, young women presidents? Would we have enough full-time missionaries? Would we have enough full tithe payers? No. We would be totally swamped. And that's just 1 million. So what's going to happen when Christ comes and says, hello, By the way, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And sorry, I always have to clarify that this goes over people's head. He's just making a joke. Of course, Christ wouldn't say that. He would say, "This is my church." So don't get all bent out of shape over that. That's what he's going to say. Are we going to be ready when 2 billion people want to join the church in one day? We have to be ready. Jesus isn't going to come to watch the church fail. He's going to come when the church is ready to succeed. When we have a leadership base strong enough all over the world that we will be able to welcome everyone into the church, and we will be able to, as a church, as Israel, gather all of God's children on both sides of the veil home to him. Okay, and then President Nelson said, oh, dang it, I thought I had this pulled up. It probably got messed up when I zoomed in. Let's see, looking for the word exponential. Okay, President Nelson, November 1st, 2018. This is a social media post on Facebook, Instagram, X. He says, "We won't give up just because it's a big job. We're just at the exponential phase of growth." And it's interesting because there's been a lot of talk about growth lately from Elder Cook. We just broke a record for the largest number of new converts in a 12-month period. And they've recently talked about how, I guess, conversions are up 20% all across the world. In North America, it's 17%, but in all the rest of the world, it's up 20%. So things are speeding up. So I bring this up because there's been all these changes, and I wonder if these changes accomplish a few different things. Number one, they make the church truly a more global and synchronized church. I think that's one, and that does have to do with growth, and that's what you would want whenever there's that large influx of 2 billion people in one day. You'd want the entire church to be synchronized, not fractured, and everybody on the same page. Everything's streamlined. And then also, if you have somebody that's already used to not going to church very often, like you always have the typical example of the Catholic, like there's, you have devout Catholics that I'm sure go every Sunday, but then you have other Catholics that only show up for, Christmas and Easter maybe, or for certain communions, sacraments, things like that, special events. So if you have people that generally don't spend a lot of time going to church, but then the second coming happens and they recognize that this is his church, and now you have this like really demanding church in a lot of different ways, everything from the word of wisdom to having to have callings in church, where before you went to a church where you didn't really have to do anything, you just came and sat in the pews and listened. And then on top of that, spending more time doing things with church, callings, activities, going to church every Sunday, because that is a requirement. We're supposed to take the sacrament every Sunday and attend all of our church meetings, including priesthood meetings and, the different organizations and their meetings. And then on top of that, stake conference, which is not just a 1-day event, it's 2 days. And then on top of that, twice a year, you have general conference, which is made up of up until now, made up of 5 sessions, each one about 2 hours in length. That might be a little overwhelming, and I'm sure it has been overwhelming for some converts. I know that a lot of you are converts. Can you let me know what your experience was as you shifted from whatever religion you belonged to before to this? Because I feel like this is a really high demand religion. Our church requires a lot of time. We're expected to participate and show up, and it could be hard. So that's what I think about when I think about the Saturday evening session being discontinued. It makes it easier for people that are just not used to spending so much time um, going to church or attending church events. And there could be other purposes too. These are just my speculations, but I feel like these all go really well together. So let's just go through some of these. Sometime in 2018, on the church website, Gospel Topics was launched. This is really good because I don't know what there was before this, but I think before this point, if you wanted to learn about a certain doctrine or church topic, you had to go to like your scriptures and maybe go to the Bible dictionary, or um, go to like the Gospel Principles Manual, which is a really good resource. But we are now in the information age, and everybody, has access to the internet pretty much. And Gospel Topics, now it's called Gospel Topics and Questions. It's a really good resource to quickly find what you have a question about and learn what the church teaches about that topic. Everything from the second coming to Zion to tithing to whatever. So it's easier for new members to learn about church doctrine. Um, Ministering replaces home and visiting teaching. So there used to be home teachers, but then on top of that, women had visiting teachers. So now that's all been consolidated into one. It's meant to be a higher, holier way of doing this. It's a more familiar term, ministering. For me, frankly, I kind of bristled at the term ministering because it sounds, like Protestant, like from other Christian churches, and I'm not really a huge fan. But now it's just part of our church. Now I'm used to it. But we have kind of like a simplified ministering, like less, like people are being taxed less, because if you're a female in the church, you could expect visits from home teachers for the whole family, but then on top of that, visiting teachers from, the sisters in the church, the Relief Society. Um, and then we had the end of the church's relationship with Boy Scouts of America as the church transitioned to a global youth activity program. So this goes along with the church becoming a more global and synchronized church. And then, of course, there's the hymn books, which are all being synchronized across the world to make us more united. There's been a lot of emphasis on Christ, and that's just appropriate to do so because it is his church, and it's, I think, a correction. They've talked about how there's been corrections made to using the full name of the church and so forth, but everything from temples to just everything else that we do, there's been much more focus on Jesus Christ. And we're living in a world where Jesus Christ is harder and harder to find if you're a Christian. A lot of churches are going the way of the earth. They're becoming secular, and they're not focusing on Christ being the Messiah and being the Savior of the world. So I feel like this is going to help people realize that he is here in this church. You can find him here. And that's going to be comforting for people during the influx where it's like, okay, this is a Jesus Christ focused church. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. And then we have the 4-volume Saints series, which is a good way for new members who know nothing about church history to get caught up with what's been going on for the last 200 years. And then we had 2-hour church. So it used to be 3 hours. It makes it easier. Also with Come Follow Me. If you're doing if you're like teaching your family, you're a new convert and you're learning for yourself and you're teaching your family, everyone knows that it's the teacher that learns the most because they're the ones that have to do the preparation to deliver the lesson. It's actually the teacher that learns the most. And so I'd imagine that Come Follow Me would probably be very advantageous for new converts who are learning the gospel for the first time. Yeah, I'm not going to go through the rest of these. It's too much. We recently talked about, oh wait, have I put out that video yet? I can't remember. Yeah, I think I have. The Liahona. Now we don't have the two church magazines for adults, Ensign and Leahona. Now it's all just the Leahona, which I recently learned started here in Independence, Missouri, as part of the Central States Mission back in, I think it was 1907. Well, actually, never mind. I'm not sure when it started, but I think it was 1907. So anyway, this is the newest thing that I'm adding to my list of changes. Again, there could be multiple reasons why they're doing this. Ultimately, it's the Lord that's choosing to do this. But it's not too hard to imagine that it might be in preparation for the second coming and a large influx. And even just there could be a large influx of new converts before the second coming. But a large influx before the second coming is still, I think, related to the second coming, because it's preparing for the Lord's second coming, having more members of the church, more people that have gone to the temple, more who are prepared to help the large influx after the second coming. It's like all hands on deck. We need as many people as possible to be ready to answer questions, to help guide people through this transition and into this new religion. We need more temple workers and priesthood holders that can baptize. And so you get it. Either way you look at it, I think it has to do with the second coming and preparing for that. So this is very exciting. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.